story we look at today happened at a key point. Jesus had been leading the disciples for some time, teaching them how to do ministry. Now it's time for their first test. Jesus sent them out with authority to preach the gospel, drive out demons, and pray for sick people to be healed. We pick it up in Mark chapter 6, verse 12. They went out and preached that people should repent. They drove out many demons and anointed many sick people with oil and healed them. The apostles gathered around Jesus and reported to him all they had done and taught. The disciples were excited that people were coming to faith and being healed. Now they wanted some alone time with Jesus to debrief, but they kept getting interrupted by people who wanted to see him. Because so many people were coming and going that they didn't even have a chance to eat. He said to them, "Come with me by yourselves to a quiet place and get some rest." The people wanted to see and experience miracles. There's just too many of them. Finally, Jesus said, "Let's find somewhere quiet. Let's rest." So they went away by themselves in a boat to a solitary place. But many who saw them leaving recognized them and ran on foot from all the towns, got there ahead of them. So Jesus' disciples are on a boat, and they're going across the shore of the lake, and people on shore are just running ahead. They see them, they run ahead of them, and as they pass through each town, they told people, "That's Jesus out there in that boat." The crowds knew Jesus as a great teacher and a miracle worker. With each town they passed, the crowd grew. When Jesus landed and saw a large crowd, he had compassion on them because they were like sheep without a shepherd. So he began teaching them many things. Jesus didn't say, "They found us, guys. Let's get out of here. Why can't we get away from these people?" When Jesus looked at the crowd, he didn't see them as irritating interruptions, but as people with needs. So he started teaching. In this short passage, Jesus demonstrated the pattern for serving others. First, Jesus saw the crowd. There were 5,000 men in the crowd, so there were probably 5,000 women and a lot of kids. At least 10,000 people were there. But when Jesus looked out on the crowd, he didn't see a faceless mass of humanity. Jesus looked past the crowd and saw the need. He saw them as lost sheep. Some animals do fine without supervision. Sheep tend to get confused and wander around. They need a shepherd. Not only did Jesus see the crowd, realize the need affected him personally. When Jesus looked on that crowd and realized their need, he had compassion. He felt their pain so deeply that it became his pain. Finally, Jesus invested his life in meeting their needs. Jesus began to teach. It's not the only way to meet a need, but it's the way Jesus chose to minister to that crowd that day. Now the story moves the disciples. By this time it was late in the day, so his disciples came to him. "This is a remote place," they said. "It's already very late." I'm guessing Jesus knew it was a remote place, and he probably knew what time it was since he created time. So Jesus' response was, "Thanks, Captain Obvious." What the disciples were really saying was, "Good teaching, Jesus, but you've said enough for now. It's time to stop. We got to wrap this up." It takes guts to tell Jesus it's time to quit. The disciples even came up with a plan. Send the people away so they can go to the surrounding countryside and villages and buy themselves something to eat. The disciples had missed several meals. The people had missed meals. They were hungry. The disciples' solution was send them away to get food. Now I want to compare the disciples' approach to Jesus' approach. First, they saw the crowd, same as Jesus. It's remote, it's late. There's a lot of people. Seeing the crowd isn't very hard. Most of us can do that part. The disciples not only saw the crowd, they took the second step. They realized the need. The people are hungry. That takes a little more thought, but most people can see the need. And in fact, churches are full of people who see needs and love to point them out. What the church needs is people who are willing to take the next step and be involved, be part of the answer. Seeing the need makes that need become part of your assignment. The disciples had the first two steps right. They saw the crowd, they realized the need, then they got off track. They didn't feel compassion towards the people because of their need. Instead, they felt overwhelmed by the need. There was no way they could possibly feed the people. So rather than feeling compassion, their solution was not an attempt to meet the people's need, but a plan to get rid of the people. Maybe you felt that way. You see an overwhelming need, look at your resources, and you decide, I'm so powerless to address this, I don't even want to be around this anymore. You see pictures of starving kids, living in hopeless poverty, trapped in war. You hear statistics about how many children in Arkansas won't have a meal today. You look at the pictures, but the need is overwhelming, and so you keep scrolling. That's the typical response when you come across a need so overwhelming that you feel your resources aren't enough. I just want to put some distance between myself and this. This is painful, this is frustrating, this is uncomfortable. I want to get away from it. You hear about hundreds of kids in our own state waiting for an adoptive or foster family, but there are just too many of them. How can you possibly make a difference with what you have? So you avoid the conversation and the feelings. You hear about a need among people overseas who've never had their own Bible. There are thousands of them. There's just one of you. How is your little bit going to help? Jesus understood that tendency in his followers then and now. The disciples failed the test. But Jesus wasn't going to leave them in that condition. A truly great teacher, if everyone in the class makes an F on a test, doesn't say, I need to get some new students because these are stupid. The great teacher doesn't blame the students, but instead says, guess we missed something. Let's go over it again. That's what Jesus did in verse 37. He said, I got an idea. You give them something to eat. Don't send them away. You observe the need. You realize it. It's your assignment. Give them something to eat. They said to him, that would take 8 months of a man's wages. Are we going to spend that much on bread and give it to them to eat? How are we supposed to give them something to eat? Where are we going to find that much food? What's going to be open this late? The disciples were stuck, overwhelmed by the need. In response, Jesus asked, how many loaves do you have? It's the key question in the story. What do you have? I know the need's overwhelming. I know you don't feel qualified or able to make a difference. But what have you got? What do you have? Instead of focusing on how you can't make a difference, change the focus. What have you got? How many loaves do you have? He asked. Go see. It must have been an amazing scene as the disciples went through the huge crowd looking for food and asking people, hey, you got anything to eat? Do you have a granola bar? A Rice Krispie treat? Beef jerky? A Pop-Tart? I know it's getting close to lunch, and so I'm making this hard for you guys. Now we switch to John chapter 6 and pick up the rest of the story. Andrew, Simon Peter's brother, spoke up. Here's a boy with 5 small barley loaves and 2 small fish. I wonder, did the boy volunteer his lunch? Did the disciples have to talk him into it? Did they bribe him? Did they threaten him? How did the lunch get from the little boy's hand into the disciples' hands? Some of you grew up in church. You've heard this story 100 times. This is one story where you're better off if you started coming to church as an adult, because the felt board version you saw as a kid messed this story up. Do you remember felt boards? Remember these? First church I attended in Normal, Illinois as a kid. Kids' church was down in the basement. Little old lady taught us, and we always had pictures on the felt board. I loved it. I thought it was a ton of fun. I always wanted to be the one who got to put the pictures on the board. And I'm not going to let you, because this is my story, so I'm going to do it for me. In this story, it was 5 loaves and 2 fishes. But the pictures in your Sunday school books and on the felt board depicted it in a very interesting way. First, he was a very typical little boy. He had curly hair. He had dimples. He wore a Bible costume because he's in the Bible, and everybody knows in Bible times they wore bathrobes, so he did. Then this little boy had a massive lunch. He had 5 giant loaves of French bread. The boy was about 4 feet tall. The bread, he had 10-foot loaves of bread. I mean, he had a lot of bread. The 2 fish looked like giant trophy marlin that somebody had taken off their mantle. That's the picture we have of this story growing up. A little boy brought 2 whales and 5 10-foot loaves of bread. He must have had like a donkey pulling a wagon to carry this massive amount of food. It's not even close to the truth. This is one little boy's lunch. No one sends their kids to school with 5 giant loaves of French bread. Just in case, son, somebody else wants some bread. And what mom would send their kid to school with 2 whales for lunch? Do you know why the makers of Sunday school material exaggerate this story? Because Jesus was going to have to feed a lot of people. So they helped Jesus out by giving him 5 really big loaves of bread and some massive fish. They want to make it a little easier. But it was going to take a miracle no matter the size of the loaves, so we might as well get it right. This was the biblical equivalent of a good old-fashioned Happy Meal. 5 loaves, 2 fish, about as much food as a hamburger and stale, soggy fries. The bread was most likely 5 little barley loaves, about the size of a fun-sized candy bar, 1 or 2 bites each, smaller than a biscuit. The fish were probably like sardines. Remember, there's no refrigeration then. To keep fish, they smoked them in salt and cured them. Why did the boy still have his lunch? The Bible doesn't say. My theory is he didn't like sardines. He hated it when mom packed that for lunch. So even though he was hungry, he wasn't going to eat that. That'd be like if mom packed me pickles. It's just not going to happen. He carried his lunch around looking for someone to trade with. I don't know. Regardless, 5 loaves, 2 fish. When we see a need, especially a massive one, our response is often the same as the disciples. You look at the size of the need and you take a personal inventory. The need is huge. Too huge for what you have. The need is overwhelming. You wonder, can I make a difference? Jesus says, wrong question. Stop telling me what you don't have. Instead, tell me what you do have. The question is not, what don't you have? The question is, what's in your lunch bag? When I was a kid, how you brought your lunch to school had a lot to do with your social status. Anybody remember this? If you had a plain brown bag, you were a loser. You needed a cool lunchbox. Mickey Mouse, super cool. Curious George, not so cool. Loser. Kermit the Frog, the ultimate and cool. Kermit sang the best love song in any movie. Why are there so many songs about rainbows? Well, apparently you don't know it, but it's a great song. Star Trek, way cool. Then, now, if you're a Trekkie, loser. Sorry. Brady Bunch, really not cool. Although everyone had a crush on Marcia. They didn't talk about Jan and Cindy, but Marcia, if you had a Spider-Man lunchbox, yeah. Not only were you cool, your mom was cool. And then the lunchbox everyone wanted, but very few people had. Super Rod. If you had this lunchbox, you were the pinnacle of coolness. When the need is big, even overwhelming, Jesus says, what do you have? What's in your lunchbox? You look and say, Lord, this is all I have. It's not enough. Or you play the comparison game. I listen to a great preacher and think, sure wish I could talk like that. I'm never going to measure up. We get to an offering, you say, I wish I could give $10,000. I only have $35, enough for one Bible. What good is that? You spend way too much time looking into other people's lunch boxes instead of saying, what do I have? Maybe God can use this to make a difference. One person says, I'm not much of a teacher. I'm not good at it. I'm a terrible talker. Good listener, terrible talker. Wait, you're a good listener? You don't have to be a good talker to visit people in nursing homes. Just a good listener. You just discovered something in your lunchbox that God can use. Somebody else says, well, I'm not really a people person. I like working with computers and tech stuff. Do you have any idea how many people serve behind the scenes to make this service happen? There are people behind soundboards. There are people in video rooms, people running cameras, people running screens, people hosting the online service. I could go on and on. Those people don't want to be on the platform or have a microphone. They have a total different expertise. At some point along the way, each of those people said, Lord, it's not much. And I don't know if you can use it, but this is what you put in my lunchbox, and it'd be great if you could use it to minister to others. That's approaching it like this passage would have you to. Jesus says, what have you got? Look in the lunchbox. Let's see what's there. I wonder if the disciples thought that one little boy's lunch would do any good. Probably not. But Andrew brought the lunch to Jesus. Then Jesus directed them to have all the people sit down in groups on the green grass. So they sat down in groups of hundreds and fifties, all around this massive field. Jesus says, get them seated, get them together, we're going to have a meal. If I was the disciple, I think I'd said, show me the food first. Then I'll help sit the people down. Because if I tell them, sit down, we'll eat dinner, and there's no food, this isn't going to go well. God consistently does that. God says, risk embarrassment. Risk putting yourself on the line. Where if I don't come through, you're in a world of hurt. Take a chance. Quit whining about what you don't have. Let's talk about what you have. Some of the most valuable experiences in life unfold when you take a chance. When you trust God with something completely out of your control. The crowd sat down, taking the 5 loaves and the 2 fish, looking up to heaven. Jesus gave thanks and broke the loaves. Then he gave them to his disciples to set before the people. He also divided the 2 fish among them. They all ate and were satisfied. Everyone was full. Jesus took the little boy's lunch, blessed it, multiplied it, gave it back to the disciples, and they fed all the people. Somewhere around 10,000 people ate from one little boy's lunch. You say, well, I don't believe that story. There's a problem with that. Because these books, these separate accounts that tell the same story, were written not long after that happened. There were people still alive who'd been there. They would have called him out. It was a lie. This is not just a fairy tale. It's really happened. Fed the whole crowd, and the disciples picked up 12 basketfuls of broken pieces of bread and fish, one for each disciple. The number of the men who had eaten was 5,000. One of my friends taught for years in our church. Her name's Chucky Shirley. She sent me an email this week, and I like her thought on the story. She said, when I think about the story of the little boy offering his lunch to Jesus, I believe Jesus rewarded him for giving what he had. It doesn't say anything in the Bible about what happened to the 12 baskets full of leftovers, but in my mind, I see the 12 disciples, each with a basket on their shoulders, headed to the little boy's home. When Jesus used the disciples' boat to teach them afterwards, their nets were filled with fish. I think God rewards those believers with a heart to give. The one person we really haven't talked about is that little boy. Regardless of how enthusiastic he was about giving away his lunch, he did it. Someone came to him and said, Jesus needs your lunch. And maybe he thought Jesus was hungry and gave his lunch. We don't know. The point is, the little boy gave all he had. Despite everyone around being so overwhelmed by the need, he said, it's not much. But if Jesus wants it, he can have it. And when he gave his little bit to Jesus, it became the seed for a miracle. The Bible never tells us his name. We don't know what happened to him after this story. He might have become a rabbi or a disciple. Maybe he taught thousands, or maybe this was his only moment in the spotlight and no one even knew his name. We don't know. But because he was willing to give what he had, the story made the Bible, and over 2,000 years later, we are still talking about the results of his giving. My question for you is, what's in your lunchbox? I'm not asking about the size of the need. I'm asking, what do you have to give? What are you willing to do? Time, energy, talent, passion, money, love. What have you been holding back because the need seems overwhelming? We have the tendency, when faced with an overwhelming need, to do nothing. Jesus says, what have you got? Let's see if I can use that. Are you willing to give what you have? Do it and watch him multiply it in amazing ways for the kingdom. God wants to use you. It's time to get out of the crowd and get in the game. Use what God has given you. If you're good with kids, work in early childhood. When service is over, go to the guest center, fill out the forms, sign up and join the team. I think of Darcy Cogdill. Darcy said, I don't know that I have any amazing talent, but I've got time and I can drive. She fills up all the buses every week. I think of Jennifer Nash, who leads our ministry to special needs kids, school kids. Each one of them looked in their lunchbox and said, Lord, this is what I have. If you can use this, I'm willing to give it and see if maybe it'll make a difference. I think of Donald Stamps. You've never heard his name. He was a missionary to Brazil. In the 80s, hundreds of pastors in Brazil had no access to Bible college training. They didn't even have Bibles. Donald was dying of cancer. He knew he couldn't provide the teaching and training. He knew he didn't have enough time left. So using the time, talent, and energy he had, he wrote Bible study notes and articles for the pastor in their language. And in 1991, a few weeks after he finished writing, Donald passed away with no idea of what his last gift to pastors would become. In his notes, in the articles he wrote, the sermon helps he wrote became what we call the Fire Bible. And today the Fire Bible is translated into 65 languages. There's another 15 languages in process, and the goal is 100 languages. One guy who said, this is what I got. Last year we provided the Fire Bible to the Uyghur people in China and Kazakhstan. Pastor Randy was there. We had other groups start asking us for the Fire Bible in their language, specifically the Central Asian Russian. CARS is the acronym. It's the Russian language, but with words Asian Muslims better understand. It's a dialect. It will be used in countries like Kazakhstan, Tajikistan, Uzbekistan, Kyrgyzstan, where there is no Bible college. Pastors, many of them that don't have a Bible, sure don't have a study Bible. The region's hard for Christians. A few years ago, I had the privilege of training underground church pastors. Underground church meaning illegal. They're not able to meet in public. We drove halfway in one vehicle. It was secret agent stuff, making sure we weren't followed. Then we changed cars, got in a different vehicle, took another one for the next part of the trip. Sentries were posted at the entrance. The 45 men and women in that room were there at the risk of their lives and their freedom, hungry for training and learning. IBEC told us for many Christians in Kyrgyzstan, persecution is a daily occurrence. They face discrimination, whether it's in their local community, workplace, the army. Some converts are locked up for long periods of time by their family and beaten. Local Islamic teachers preach against them, cause them to be kicked out of the community. In Tajikistan, one of our pastors, Pastor Bakfrom, was arrested, tried, and convicted for singing extremist songs. He sang extremist songs and spent 3 years in prison. His extremist songs were worship songs in church. People like this in America like to say, oh, we're being persecuted. We don't even understand. A few minutes ago, we sang, most of us, and no one was arrested. He was arrested and spent 3 years in prison for worship. Their building was confiscated. They now meet in a shipping container. In July of 2022, the government announced no new churches could be registered, and it was illegal for children to participate in religious activities. Government is doing everything it can to shut down the church, and in spite of that, God's church is growing. What they need are Bibles, specifically study Bibles, with all the helps for the pastors. Our part is really easy. We're going to give a bunch of money to buy Bibles. They've got the hard part. And risking persecution and prison, they're sharing Jesus. This Bible will be specially designed for Russian-speaking people in Central Asia. Translation of the Bible text is done. We're now working on study notes and materials. The cost to print and deliver a Fire Bible is $35. $35. The question is not, how much do you have? The question is, are you willing to give what you have? And allow God to use it to make a difference?